Ladies and gentlemen, the goal in your life is not to figure out how to be comfortable in your mental prisons, but to realize that you have the keys to set yourself free. Hey everybody, welcome to How to Be Mesmerizing. It's Tim Shurr, and today we have a legend in the house. Mr. Brian Tracy is with us. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian.
Hi Tim, how are you?
Oh my goodness. Brian, holy smokes. I am fantastic. How are you?
I'm great, thank you very much.
Oh my goodness. I have to tell you, this is like the highlight of my career so far. This is such an honor for you to be a part of this program today.
It's a great honor to be with you too, and thank you.
Brian, what would you say is the secret to success?
It's interesting because it's the same for me as for other people who started off poor with very few prospects and became successful. And they have what you've heard. It's an attitude of gratitude. They're just grateful for having been able to help someone with, like my friend yesterday, who has been a friend for 10 years. So if you come from a humble background, generally speaking, people are really grateful to God, to the world, to the universe, and they want to express their gratitude by sharing the ideas that have helped them. And sometimes it's just one idea. I'll tell you one idea that I remember very clearly. H.L. Hunt, the big oil billionaire, who started off, he was the 10th child of a sharecropper family in Oklahoma. And he grew up and went to work in the oil fields. And he won an oil lease in a poker game. And this was his first lease. And then he worked to get a drilling company to drill on the soils, and they hit oil.
Oh, wow.
And he became, and after that he drilled more and more and more wells. He became one of the richest men in the world, one of the first self-made billionaires, and wonderful man. And after he died, and I got a call one day from his son, and I'd read about Hunt Oil and his son Ray Hunt in Time magazine. So I got a call from him, and he called me at home at 8 o'clock at night, and he said, "Hello, Brian." It's Texas. He said, "My name is Ray Hunt, and I was wondering if I could talk to you about coming to my company." And I said, "Geez, I know you. I know all about you." The Time magazine called him the Smart Hunt because there were several children and everything else. And I know all about you. I said, "It's such an honor to hear from you." And so he hired me, and I went and I spoke for his company. And then I took all of his people away to a 3-day strategic planning meeting to plan the future of the company. And they came from all over the world. He's got oil interests everywhere. And so I was very close to him for a while. But anyway, his father was on a radio interview, and he was asked a question many years ago from a good friend of mine. And he asked him, what advice would you give for people who want to also be successful? And he said, it's very simple. He said, you decide exactly what you want. He said, and then you focus on getting that and don't do anything else but that until you have achieved your goal. And I still remember that. And I've passed that on to millions of people, actually, the importance of setting clear goals and focusing. I have written a book called Eat That Frog. I don't know if you've read it.
That's a classic. You have to read it or you can't even be in this field.
And it's interesting. My publisher last week, we're doing a third publication of it. It's called Eat That Frog for Students. And it's a complete rewrite to help students get good grades and get into the college of their choice. And that is a hot subject for young people who are overwhelmed with too much to do, and especially to get good grades in school and to get into a good university. So we've rewritten the whole book with 2 more chapters on technology, modern technology like this. Anyway, so I was talking to my publisher, and I think that book will probably sell millions of copies. But he said that my book has just hit 2.5 million copies in 50 languages. 50 languages. And that makes it the best-selling book on time management in history.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. And why did I write that book? Well, I sat down, surprisingly, I wrote a series of 21s. I was watching a program on TV. It was called How to Marry a Millionaire. You may remember it was very controversial more than a decade ago. 10, 15 years ago. How to Marry a Millionaire. It was women sort of competing to marry a millionaire. And then, if you remember what happened, he finally chose the person, and women hated this program. They hated the idea that love was a mercenary thing, that you only did it to get money. And so there's lots of controversy over it. And then they finally matched up 2 people, the millionaire and one of the people that had applied. And they got married. And it turned out the guy wasn't a millionaire at all.
No,
he didn't
really?
have money. And the 2 of them were married, and they got terrible fights, and they broke up, and the program went off the air. it was so amazing. And there's all kinds of letters to the editor.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, in the middle of this, when the program was really popular, I saw it. I said, "This isn't true." I said, "That's not how you marry a millionaire." I said, "I'll write a book on how to really marry a millionaire." There wasn't a book on the subject, how to really marry a millionaire. And my secretary, Shirley, wonderful woman, she said, "Brian," she said, "that's not a good title. Women would hate it because it makes it appear that women are just mercenaries, that they don't care about love or anything else." And I said, "Well, okay." I said, "How about the title, How to Meet and Marry the Man of Your Dreams?" She said, "That's the perfect title. That's what women want to do." So I wrote down 21 ways to meet and marry the man of your dreams. And I thought, she came to me again. She said, "But, I am engaged to a man that I met online." And I found out later that about 60% of relationships that form online are by men. It's not women. So I said, "Okay, I'll write another book, How to Meet and Marry the Woman of Your Dreams." And so I wrote down 21 chapters. And then people said, "Well, what if people are already happy, already married? They're happy." So I came up with 21 ways to stay in love forever. 21 ways to stay in love. They just sold and sold and sold, and said, "Well, what about 21 ways to be a sales superstar?" Kaboom! Became a best-selling book. And then I wrote a book, 21 ways to double your income and double your time off. And so I sent it to my publisher, and he said, "I don't know. I don't," and he's a brilliant publisher. He said, "I don't like the title." He said, "The content is tremendous. It's just 21 great time management techniques. But there's one technique in there called Eat That Frog." And it was from a book by Mark Twain, who said, if you eat a live frog first thing every morning, you'll know that's probably the worst thing that's going to happen to you all day long. And your live frog is your biggest task, your most important task, the task that can have the biggest difference in your life right now. And so he said, my publisher said, so we could take that title from chapter 15 and make it the title of the book, and then run the idea of preparing and everything all the way through the book. And he said, then it would be a good book. So I took it. I was in a writing mode at that time. I could produce stuff that was unbelievable. And so I took it and rewrote it, and they published it as Eat That Frog. And they said, well, we don't know how many copies it will sell, but there was fish was a popular topic. There was another one by Ken Blanchard called
Move My Cheese. Who Moved My Cheese?
Yes. So he said this would be a sort of a book about an animal, just like the ones that are really popular. And this book just exploded. And, and the publishing company, this is the biggest book in the history of the publishing company. I remember I went down to visit them. They're up to visit them in San Francisco. And the president of the company came to me. I've known him. His name is Jeevan. He's from India. Brilliant guy. He came up and he said, "It's so nice to meet the man who's been paying my paycheck for the last 10 years." so anyway, I wrote these 21s, and 21. I just gave the rights to my distributor, my seminar organizer in Thailand, to a program that I wrote, 21 Success Secrets of Self-Made Millionaires. I did enormous research on this, and I found everybody wants to be wealthy. So I wrote this program, and the program is outstanding. I wrote it, I published it as a book, I published it online, and I'm giving him the rights to use it to promote a seminar for me in Thailand, because they will send it out. Here's a gift, and this man is actually coming to Bangkok, so sign up for the seminar. And we've done that many times. But everything I teach is practical and absolutely incontrovertible. Nobody can say, well, that's not true. They all say, they just basically, as they read, they nod their heads. This is good stuff. I'll tell you an interesting story. You've heard of the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Mm-hmm. And I read an introduction to a book on Esalen and the S training many years ago. And in the introduction, was one of the first people that actually write about what went on in the S training, because most of it was really secret. Mm-hmm. And so and in the introduction, it talked about a frog, and it talked about the frog. A rat. Talked about a rat, and how scientists would take the rat and put it into a cage, and there would be 4 holes or tunnels out of the cage, and they would put a little bit of cheese in the end of the 4th tunnel. Mm-hmm. And the rat would come in and look around left, right, and would finally find the cheese and would eat it. And then the next day they would take the cheese and put it just a little bit further back in the 4th tunnel. And the rat would search around, and they would very quickly go to the 4th tunnel and go in and get it. And they kept doing that each day to move. I don't know if you're familiar. Are you familiar with this story?
Oh, I haven't listened to you tell it like this live before, so you keep going. I love it.
It was just written. They just moved the cheese back to the end of the 4th tunnel, and the rat would come in, go straight to the 4th tunnel, goes straight to the back, and get his cheese. Then they took the cheese out and they put it in the end of the 2nd tunnel. Put the rat into the cage. The rat would go in straight to the 4th tunnel, and there's no cheese. And he'd come out. We should tell this as a story. He'd come out and he'd look up at the scientists, the rat, and would say, "Where's my cheese?" And scientists wouldn't say anything. So the rat would go back into the 4th tunnel and come out, get out, look at the tunnels, go back in the 4th tunnel, and get out. And here's the moral of the story in the book, in the introduction. Here's the moral of the story. The rat with a brain the size of a pea will eventually conclude that there is no cheese at the end of the 4th tunnel, and will eventually find the cheese at the back of the 2nd tunnel. But human beings with the most powerful brain in all of history will continue to go down the 4th tunnel forever. And they'll keep doing the same thing over and over again, even though it's not working and they're not getting any cheese. So I would tell this as a brief story, and then I would talk about deciding on what you want and looking at different ways to get it, and being flexible and open to trying different things and so on. It was a good seminar. People loved the seminar. And then out came this book, Who Moved My Cheese? And it became a tremendous bestseller. And it was exactly my story that I told in my seminars. And they interviewed, because Ken Blanchard didn't write it. It was written by, they co-wrote it, but Ken doesn't write. What was his name? Stuart Johnson. He was the co-writer. And Stuart Johnson is a good writer. So he took it, he wrote it, and he was on television. He's asked, "Where did you get the idea for this Who Moved My Cheese?" And he said, "I don't recall."
No.
He had gone, I concluded he had gone to one of my seminars and heard that story and then created the book out of it. And basically the book is just simply an expansion of that story, which I told to 1,000, 1,500 person audiences all over the country. And either he attended one of those seminars or somebody attended and told the story. And so they wrote the book and it became one of the best sellers in history. Interesting story. Well, I did another speech. And actually it was an introduction to a sales seminar. And the module was on becoming unstoppable. And I just told a story about the qualities for success. Yeah. And the most important quality for success in selling is to become unstoppable, is to persist, to never give up. And the reason why people succeed is because they persist, and the reason that they fail is because they don't, especially in sales, because there's so much rejection in sales. And I said, earlier, I said, you become what you think about most of the time. I said, but you also become what you say to yourself most of the time. But whatever you say to yourself is actually accepted by your subconscious mind as an instruction. Your subconscious mind, contrary to popular belief, is like a computer. It accepts information, it processes it, and it feeds it back when you ask for it. It has no imagination of its own. It's just basically a storage place for information. It is your superconscious mind, which is a different mind, that is the source of inspiration and ideas and so on. So people say, well, you program your subconscious. No, what you do is you send instructions to your subconscious mind, and your subconscious mind is very much like a technician, a white coat, who works in a large computer factory, and they take the instructions to the other computer, the superconscious, and they put it into the superconscious, and the superconscious then begins to work 24 hours a day to bring your goal into fruition. And that's what I teach, and it works. It's so wonderful, Tim. It's really, I've taught it all over the world, and everybody who uses the ideas, it works. I've never had a person come back to me and say, I tried your ideas and it didn't work. They only come back and say, I tried your ideas and they say these words, my favorite words. I hear them all over the world. People come back and say, Mr. Tracy, you changed my life. You made me rich. You changed my life. You made me rich. I've heard that 1,000 times. People write to me and say, you changed my life. You made me rich. And I'll say, well, what was it, in the seminar that was so helpful to you? And they beam. They smile. And they say, it was the goals. It was the goals. And he said, I never heard about goals until you explained them. Anyway, to come back to my other story, I said, how do you become unstoppable? Does everybody here want to become unstoppable? And everybody says, everybody nods. I say, well, here it is. You become what you say to yourself most of the time. So say these words, I am unstoppable. Say it. So everybody sort of says, I am unstoppable. I said, no, don't suck your thumb. I said, I want to hear it. Say, I am unstoppable. And they say it again, louder. And I say, no. I want to hear it. Say it like you really mean it. Say, I am unstoppable. And the whole audience goes, I am unstoppable. Yeah. From now on, for the rest of your life, you repeat that. I am unstoppable. I am unstoppable. I am unstoppable. And before every sales call, before you start work every day, just send that command to your subconscious mind that you are unstoppable. And you will be amazed. You will never quit. And if you don't ever quit, if you don't ever stop, then nothing can stop you from being a great success. And the next year after I started giving that, there were 2 books on the book stands called Unstoppable, Becoming Unstoppable, The Unstoppable. There were two people went and wrote books with that title and with that opening. And then one of them even sent me a copy of the book Unstoppable because they loved the title so much. And I am very happy for their success. I'm very happy for their success. So yeah,
it's been extraordinary, the career that you've had, the amount of people that you have touched and transformed. I mean, it's been a remarkable career that you've had. And so, I know you've heard it a million times, but, even now I want to thank you so much for the the level of contribution. You really have transformed the world. And the greatest compliment they say is you want to make sure before you leave this planet that you somehow make it better than it was before you got here. And you have done that.
Well, you're doing that as well, Tim. That everything in our world today is ideas. And one idea can be life transforming. An idea like Who Moved My Cheese? That one idea made him one of the most successful authors in history, because they now sold, I think, 17 million copies of the book, and in different languages. And it was just one inspiration. In this case, it was a whole inspiration.
So out of all the adventures that you've had, Brian, I mean, my goodness, all the adventures and things, is there one particular adventure that you went on or that you had that kind of is at the top for you?
Yes, and I've written about it, by the way.
Of course you have.
One of my first books, and it's called Many Miles to Go. And it is about my crossing of the Sahara Desert when I was 21 years old. And two friends of mine and I decided to go off and see the world, starting in Vancouver, British Columbia. And we got an old car and we drove it across the country and down through Montreal to Chicago and up to Toronto and Montreal. And where we started, our goal was to get a job on a ship and work our way across the Atlantic, because it's expensive. We had $1,000 total between the three of us. And today that would be worth maybe $3,000 or $4,000. So we figured that this would be enough to get us going, and we just keep working our way. So we got to Montreal, and we went to the waterfront, and we went to every single ship on the waterfront and asked them where they were going. And the ships that were going to Europe, we went and applied for jobs as bottom level, grungy seafarers, and they all said no. And so we went to every single ship. It took us an entire day. By the end of the day, we were exhausted. And I said, well, there's ships coming in and out all the time. Let's try again tomorrow. And they went off and they were talking amongst themselves, my two partners. And then they came back and they said, well, we don't want to do this anymore. We want to buy passage on a freighter, in which freighters sell passage just to a small number of travelers. It's not like not like in a Carnival cruise. It's a much smaller cabin. It's much cheaper. So then we want to buy passage on a ship, and we'll work our way when we get to England. And I said, but if you quit now, you'll always quit. This is the first day that we've already had adversity. We've tried all day and we're tired and we've failed and we've got all these no's. So tomorrow we try again. If necessary, we'll go to another port city like Boston or Halifax, and there's ships going. They said, no, we've decided, and they were sort of like this, we've decided that we're going to pay our own way. So do you want to come with us or not? And I said, no. I said, I won't do that, because if you quit, the first time you reach adversity, you'll always quit. You'll set up a mental template within your brain for quitting. So we parted kind of unfriendly, and we got their money. We sent the money from Vancouver, and they took 2/3 of it. So it was our pot, and they bought passage on a ship. And I think it cost $150 or something. It wasn't that expensive, and they left. And so I stayed in Montreal, and I worked for the next 5 months. I worked in factories, I worked in construction, I worked in different things, and I saved my money. And finally, the spring was coming, and the end of February, I put all my stuff in a trunk that I had bought at a pawn shop, and I sent the trunk to Halifax, and then I sort of hitchhiked and worked my way to Halifax, trucks, and I finally got to Halifax. It's the end of the winter, and it's cold, and I went to the YMCA for the night, because it's the only place, and I couldn't afford very much. YMCA was like $1.50 for a room. And the next day, I was going to go down to the waterfront and get a job on a ship. And so I went to the entire waterfront. I checked every single ship. I asked them where they were going, and if they were going to Europe, I'd go in and apply for a job. And I got no. At the end of the day, it was cold, it was raining, I was exhausted. and I went back to I still remember this. I went back to the YMCA, which was up a long, long, long hill. And I finally got to the YMCA, and then I turned around and looked, and it looked back at the port, and there were two ships on a separate dock that I hadn't seen in the day when I was looking for a job. And it was about half a mile away, and it was cold. And I remember it was just 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And I looked at the warm YMCA. So I stood there at the door, and I looked down there, and I said, "What do you do?" And what I said was, "You don't quit." So I turned around, and I walked all the way down the hill, all the way down to the dock. And I went to the first ship, and I asked them, where you're bound for? And they said, South America. So that's no possibility. So I went to the second ship. This is the last ship in the entire port of Halifax. I said, "Where are you bound for?" They said, "We're going to Liverpool." I said, "Do you need any help?" They said, "Why don't you come up and talk to the captain?" So I went up and was introduced to the captain, and he said, "What can I do for you?" He's a very polite man. It was a Danish ship called the Nordpol, the Danish ship. And he said, "What can I do for you?" I said, I need a job to get to England. He said, "What kind of a job do you want?" I said, "I will do anything. I will do anything, any job you want." I said, "I can have one opening," he said, "in the kitchen, cleaning pots and pans for the staff. Well, would you take that job?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, "Good." This was about 6 o'clock at night. He said, "Our ship sails at 8 o'clock, and ships sail on the minute. If you can be on board by 8 o'clock, you've got a job."
Wow.
Well, I ran back up that hill, and I dragged my trunk out, and I had sent the trunk to a shipping line. I had to go and get the trunk from the shipping line, and this time I took a taxi, and I taxied back up, and I got my clothes from the YMCA, and I taxied all the way back down, and I got onto that ship at 5 minutes to 8.
Oh my gosh. And this is like a movie, Brian. It's like a movie.
At 8 o'clock, the ship sailed, and it sailed way out into the ocean, and I could see the lights of Halifax dimming into the ocean as I began my travel to Europe. And I did. I worked my way all the way to Liverpool. I got off. I got my stuff, and I went down to, I forget where it was, and got my friends. And my friends and I got together again. And they said, "Now let's go to Africa." We decided we're going to go to Africa. Everybody else was going to Europe at that time to hitchhike around with backpacks. So we decided we'd do something different. We'd go to Africa because nobody was going to Africa. And I always say, we didn't stop to ask, why is it that no one else was going to Africa? I said, we found out in due time. So we decided, let's do something so we can be famous, and we'll ride bicycles across Africa. Nobody's ever ridden a bicycle across Africa. Wow. So we went out and we bought 3 bicycles, and we rode the bicycles all the way down to the port and across, and then we took the bicycles across, and we started off driving across France. And I say in my book, it's a geographical anomaly, but when you're riding a bicycle in France, all the hills are uphill, and the wind is always in your face. I said, that doesn't sound correct, but that's the way it is. Is you're riding these bicycles, and you're exhausted. Our legs were exhausted. We slept in the ditches on the side of the road. Got up in the morning, just kept riding and riding. And finally, we got to Gibraltar, and by this time we realized why no one was going to Africa, because it was a murder just to go across Europe. And so we sold the bicycles and took the pooled amount of money and bought an old Land Rover. And the Land Rover was old. It was a piece of you-know-what, and but it still ran. And so we got in the Land Rover. It took us about 2 weeks. We had to write for money for everybody we knew. We wrote and begged them for money to help us go to Africa, and we would pay them back as soon as we had a job. And we got it. We collected about $350. One man who was a friend of Jeff's father from many years ago. Jeff was one of my partners. One man who lived in England. I never met him. We sent him the letter and said, please. We sent everybody a letter begging for money, and he sent us $300. $300 at that time was the equivalent to $1,000. Wow. It was the most amazing thing. Could not believe it. Our friends back home sent us 20 and 25 and $50, and this man sent us $300. And I still remember it. that we couldn't believe it. We were going to Africa, and here we were sleeping on the beach with our old Land Rover, and we could see Africa across the water, the Straits of Gibraltar. And we sat there, and we didn't have any money now. We spent all our money on the Land Rover, hoping that somebody would send us enough money. We just sat there, and finally the money came. And there's a story there. If you build it, they will come. If you fantasize and visualize the money, it will come. And it came from someone that Jeff had never known before, and it came with a letter. And it said, I understand what it's like to be young and ambitious and to run out of money. That's what happened to me. He said, and I don't want that to happen to you, so I'm going to help you. And so he sent us, it was basically 100 pounds, which was $300, which today would probably be 1,000 or more, and saved our lives. So the next day we packed up food and everything else and crossed on the ferry to Tangiers, and then drove down through Morocco and across into Algeria. And the vehicle was acting up and falling apart and everything else. And we finally got to a little town called, I think it was Adrar. And the three of us, one of them quit, said, I can't go any further. This is no good for me. And he hitchhiked back to Gibraltar and hitchhiked back to England and then went home. And we didn't see him for another year or two. And so here's Jeff and I, and we're broke. And the vehicle is beat to hell. The tires have turned in because of twisting of the axles, and we're out of money again. So Jeff hitchhiked north to Algiers, the capital, to write for money, to beg his parents for money, which they gave us. And I worked to fix the vehicle. And I found old vehicles that were falling apart and they were laying by the side of the road, and took the parts off them and stripped it down and straightened out my axles and got extra cans for gasoline and everything. And I had that vehicle ready to go. And then a few days later, Jeff reappears, just walking down the street. And I said, Jeff, I'm here. And we both set off to cross the desert. And it's a long story, but eventually we got across, and we almost died in the desert. We were told as we were moving toward the crossing, we talked to Tuaregs, people who lived in the desert for many years, and they would say, where are you going? I said, well, we're going to cross the Sahara into Africa. And they said, no, you can't do that. You'll die in the desert. You just can't make it. It's too far. There's no water. There's nothing out there. He said, you'll die in the desert. And as we went from town to town, people would come up to us and say, and introduce us to other people. He says, here are the two young men who are going out to die in the desert. And they said, oh, you're going to die in the desert. They shake hands. They were very careful about it. It's funny. And unfortunately, when I realized we'd be crossing a part of Africa that was French speaking, I had started studying French. It's about 6 months before, so I could actually communicate in French and ask questions and find out directions and so on. So I could speak to them in French, and that's what they spoke. And we just kept moving toward Africa until the car finally broke down, and we had to get it all repaired, had to get more money, we had to sell all our food and all our belongings, and then we were ready. I said in my book, then we were ready for the Sahara crossing. And we then started off across the desert, and as we got into the desert, we had a stretch of 500 miles that had nothing. It was the most empty stretch of desert in the world. There's not even a blade of grass. There's not a fly. There's just the desert and this sun that beat down at 120, 130 degrees during most of the day. And so we started off, and we had all kinds of problems, but we eventually got across the desert. And when we got over the desert, we had to actually go around we learned that you have to have special visas to get into African countries. The first African country was Mali. And they told us, if you don't have a visa, you'll be turned back. And many people young people who started off traveling, got to the border and they didn't have a visa. They said, how do you get a visa? Well, you have to go to the embassy in Paris, which was 1,000 miles away and across the Mediterranean. And that's the only way to get a visa. And so we couldn't do it. We didn't have the money, we didn't have the time. So what we did is we said, where are the checkpoints? And one of the drivers showed me on a map that this is where the checkpoints are. So what we did is we drove, and when we got to a village or a town where there's a checkpoint, we went around the town. And we kept doing this all the way down until we got to the biggest city in Mali. And then we went to the police station and we turned ourselves in. I said, we would like to turn ourselves in. We have committed a crime. And they said, oh, they don't ever see Anglos or whites. So they took me in to see the head of the department. And we sat down and said, how can I help you? And I said, we want to confess that we've committed a crime. We've entered your country illegally, because there was a river to the next state. There was a river, and we had to cross the river, and there was a bridge across the river, and it had police at both ends. So there's no way we could get further. We're stuck in this city. So we turned ourselves in, and we explained what had happened. He said, well, how did you get around our checkpoints? And I showed him my map, and we laid it out, and I said, what we did is this, and we were taking notes. Look at this, how easy it was for these people to get around the checkpoints. And and the word was autour le checkpoint. Autour, we went, nous venons autour le checkpoint. We went around the checkpoint, and then we went around here and so on. He was taking notes to beef up the checkpoints. He said, okay, he said, you're honest. You're obviously not criminal. He said, I will give you special exit visas for leaving our country. He gives us exit visas so that we could cross the bridge into the next city and the next country, which was Dahomey. And Dahomey, fortunately, was a British Commonwealth country, and we had Canadian passports, so we didn't need a passport. And then we got down to Lagos in 2 or 3 days of driving, and we had to leave the vehicle, our Land Rover, at the border and hitchhike into town, because we had to leave a deposit for the vehicle, or they wouldn't let us bring it into the country. And anyways, the story goes on and on. At every single twist and turn, we had obstacle and difficulty and obstacle and difficulty. We almost got killed under the boots of a mad mob of police in the Congo. It was amazing. But we actually finally got to Johannesburg. So we started off. It took us 9 months to go 17,000 miles and cross something like 15 countries, starting off with $300 each. And it was because we had set it as a goal, and we were determined. I was determined that once we had started, we were going to get there. We are going to get there, no matter what happens. And we did. We did. It was a life-changing experience. In my book, I say this. Ever after, I never gave up. I knew that you do not know what's going to happen to help you, but if you never give up, something will happen.
Oh my gosh, that is incredible. I mean, that would make sense after you go through something like that, which is just like that's one of the best stories I ever heard. It's like it's one of those $500 million movies, and it was a true story, and you lived it, right? And for you to come back and be challenged by a business problem, it's probably like, are you kidding me? I almost died in the Congo. I almost died in the desert. This is nothing.
There's nothing. There's a famous story, by the way. In World War II, Winston Churchill became the prime minister, and it looked like the Germans were going to overrun England, and that England would lose the war. And it was only a matter of time, because the Germans had thousands of tanks and huge army and airplanes and everything else. And so his cabinet was telling him he should give up. He should make friends with Hitler. They should accept German control of England, and we should end this war. And they kept at him all the time. And no matter how many defeats or difficulties or problems that, Churchill kept persisting. And they said to him, Mr. Churchill, why do you persist when it's clear that we have lost this war with Germany? You're just prolonging the war. He said, I persist because I have studied history. And if you study history, you learn that if you persist long enough, something always happens. Something always happens. And 3 days later, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And Franklin Roosevelt came up and gave his great speech and declared war on Hitler. and Hitler declared war on the United States. And now the United States was into World War II, and the ships began sailing, and the tanks and the airplanes, and the whole thing is history. But that wonderful line, he said, I have studied history, and if you study history, you learn that if you persist long enough, something will always happen. Oh. Something will happen. It's a wonderful, it's a spiritual principle, a psychic principle, whatever you like. But it's really the reason why people succeed greatly is that they persist no matter how hopeless the situation, and something always happens. And it's usually something totally unexpected. Here's Hitler fighting against the Germans in England, and the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and Roosevelt, who wanted to get into the war anyway, but public sentiment was against it, declared war on Japan, and by the way, Germany too. And then they put 80% of all of the military tanks, planes, everything else, 80% was sent to Britain and Europe, and only a small holding force was sent to the Pacific until they began to win in Europe. They invaded at D-Day. Then they began to send enormous amounts of men and munitions to the Pacific. That's why the Pacific War ended almost 6 months after the European War. It's because finally they had the munitions and the planes and the men to finish the job. But it's a great story. It's a great story.
Oh my gosh, it gave me chills. It gives me chills. That is such a powerful, powerful statement, and you've just reinforced it over and over again through these phenomenally good stories of if you just persist and you just keep believing and you just keep having faith and you just keep moving forward, then somehow in some way, God will bless you. He will show you the next step. He will show you what to do next.
And here's something else that I learned is that your help, your great breakthrough is going to come from a completely unexpected source, something that you could not have anticipated or done anything about. It'll just be something you'll read something in a newspaper or a magazine, a story, an opportunity, an example, a business plan, and you will take advantage of it, and it'll turn out to be the turning point in your life.
Preach on, Brother Brian, because I'm literally having that right now, this very moment with you. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, I built up the courage to reach out to Les Brown, who is a dear friend of yours, I know, and we have become so close. It's been unbelievable, like magic. And he started introducing me to more of his friends. We started connecting, and it has just been a dream come true. And now I grew up listening to your programs, right? And just the psychology of achievement. I wore out my cassette tapes. I mean, literally wore them out. They wouldn't play anymore. And just, all of that and there were many times in my, 30-year career where I thought it's never going to work out. It's never going to happen. But I just did exactly what you're saying. I refuse to give up. There's something in my brain that says I have no other choice. I don't know what else I would do. I have to keep moving forward. And and here we are. It's just amazing.
Well, it's always the same thing, is that if you're really clear, and that's what I teach, is I say my favorite word in business and success is the word clarity. Because you have to be absolutely clear about what it is that you want to accomplish, and then you have to write it down, and then you have to make a list of everything that you could think of that you would have to do to achieve the goal. And then you organize the list by priority. What do you need to do first? What do you need to do second? And then you take action. And you just continue taking action. I call it the principle of continuous action. Is no matter what happens, you just keep moving forward. Just keep moving forward. And eventually you will break through. Eventually you will break through. You'll meet a person. You'll have an idea. You'll make a sale that you hadn't thought you would make. Something will happen. If you persist long enough, something will happen. And it turns out to be a universal principle. It always happens. But you know what happens is people don't prepare themselves. Here's another thing. If you don't prepare yourself mentally in advance for adversity, temporary setbacks, failure, and so on, when you hit it, you're not ready. It's sort of like physical fitness. If you're not physically fit and you get a chance to play with a team, if you get the first time you play, you get massacred. So what you do is you prepare your mind, almost like programming it. Is you prepare your mind, read good books on people who have succeeded. That's one of the great ways to build up your confidence. But then you practice and you make a decision. You're never going to give up. You'll never give up. You'll never give up. You'll never give up. And to program yourself so when you do hit the adversity, which is absolutely inevitable. It's absolutely inevitable. Success is a story of failure, great success. And so what you have to do is there's always a certain number of failures that you have to experience before the breakthrough. Yeah. However, there's no way that you know the number. The number is known only to God. And this adversity that you're facing now, this could be the one. And if it's not the one, maybe it's the next one. But it sure is God made little green apples if you keep persisting, and one of these steps will break through. And you'll look back and you'll think, like when we crossed the desert, we look back and we realize all the problems we had, the breakdowns of the car and not running out of money and everything else. If we had not had all of those breakdowns and problems, our vehicle would have broken down in the desert and we would have died because there's no traffic in the desert. There was nobody coming through for another 6 days. It was a convoy. And if we had not had all those adversities and setbacks and repaired the vehicle, we would have died. And we realized, look back later and imagine that. So therefore, when you have setback after setback, imagine that these have been sent to you by God to prepare you for the great success that is coming. And this seems to be true for everybody throughout history, is they just persist and persist and persist. And people tell them, why do you persist? There's no chance, there's no hope and everything else. And they just keep on going. And suddenly they break through. And everybody said, oh, I always knew he would do it. I always knew he would be successful.
Oh, my gosh. That was, holy cow, Brian. I have one last question for you. Out of all the people that you've met in your life, is there one particular person that just kind of stands out as someone who has made a real impact on you, or like one of the coolest people you've ever met?
Yes, absolutely. When I was coming up in my 30s, I was struggling. I moved to Edmonton, Alberta, to do a little real estate development with a trailer park. And then my partner cut off my money, so I had no money. And I had gotten this trailer park approved for a shopping center, but I had to get money. So there was a big entrepreneur, one of the most respected people in Canada, a man named Dr. Charles Allard. And Dr. Charles Allard started from a poor family. He got a degree in medicine. He went to London. He got a degree from the Royal College of Surgeons. He came back. He became a preeminent surgeon in Canada, and he became the general director of the hospital. And people would come to him because he was making a lot of money with business ideas. And he would start to examine them. And it turned out he was a business genius. And he would select different projects to invest money and time into, and how to structure it, and so on. And one after another, they began to make money. He had the biggest car dealership eventually in Western Canada. He had one of the biggest trust companies in the country, hundreds of millions of dollars. We had restaurant chains. He had so much. Anyway, so I went to this company with my little project, my real estate project. It was about $3 million, and I needed the money. I didn't have any. So I went to him and I spoke to his son, and his son said, well, I'll introduce you to my father. And he took me in to meet the great Charles Allard. And it was like having an audience with the king. And Charles Allard was one of the greatest men. He had a reputation for integrity that was unbelievable, but also for his incredible ability to make money and to recognize a money-making opportunity. He was worth, I learned later, he was worth about $800 million at that time.
Wow.
And so I showed him my proposal, and I had spent hours putting together a proposal for money. I put it all together, every single detail, and I got letters from builders and developers. I got lease agreements from Safeway and other big companies, and I put it all together. There's 17 pieces in it because I had to get the money, and if I didn't get the money, I would lose everything. And so I had invested everything I had in this project. So I went to him and he said, it looks like a good deal. He said, I'll send you over to my lawyer, my corporate lawyer. You take your documents, and if he says it's a good deal, we'll fund it. And this is what we'll do, is we'll pay 100% of all the costs, including everything you've put into it up to now, in exchange for 75% of the shopping center. And you'll retain a 25% residual interest, and you get all your money back if my lawyer approves your proposal. So I went to see the lawyer. I still remember that. He was an older man, so smart, so gracious. And he went through it and he said, well, now, what about this? And I gave him the piece of papers, prepare. And do you have this? Let's prepare. I just did this for 3 hours. And he said at the end, he said, this is the most perfect proposal evaluation I've ever seen. He said, you answered every single question about financing and rental and costs and timing and everything. And you had it all documented, because I got people to write me letters saying this is what it would cost and how long it would take. So I showed him the whole puzzle put together. And so he called Dr. Allard and he said, I recommend that you go ahead with it. And Dr. Allard turned around and gave me $20,000. I was living on soup. He gave me $20,000 sort of as a down payment on his 75% share. So I went and I built the seminar. I built the shopping center, and I had it fully leased. The day we opened, it was fully leased. It was the biggest shopping center in the town of Leduc, which is a fast-growing small town outside of Edmonton. It was the biggest deal that had happened in their history. Everybody was there, and we had all kinds of party and food and everything else. And Dr. Allard, I said, what are you doing? What are your plans for the future? And I said, well, I don't really have any plans. He said, well, why don't you come to my office next week and Tuesday, and let's talk.
That's a dream come true, right?
I was there, and he said, how would you like to come to work for me as my personal assistant?
Oh, wow.
And that was a dream. It was a dream. Wow. I was 33 years old, and living in a rented apartment with rented furniture. And he said, how would you like to come and work for me personally? And I said, well, what would I do? And he said, well, we'll figure that out as we go along. And I said, let me think about it. And he said, how much would you charge me? What would you want to earn? And I came back to him. I said, well, I want to earn, what was it? Something $150 an hour, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I would be an independent contractor, and I wouldn't have to pay taxes and everything else. He said, okay. I said, let me think about that. He always thought about things. One of the things I learned is no matter if it's a big or an important decision, take your time to think about it, turn it over, sleep on it, and so on. Just like your mother told you, sleep on a big decision. And I was taking an MBA course at the university, and he knew that. And I finished my last class and my last exam, and I went back to my apartment. I've been working for 2 years on this, and I finally finished. And I sat down. I remember I just collapsed in my little apartment, and this was about 4:00 in the afternoon, and the phone rang, and it was Dr. Allard. And he said, have you finished your schooling? I said, yes. He said, did you write? He knew this. He said, did you write your last exam? Yes. He said, did you pass it? I said, yes. He said, well, are you going to come and work for me? I said, yes. Yes, I am. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I said, I'll see you on Monday. This is Friday afternoon at 4:00. I'll see you on Monday. He said, why not now? I said, now? Why don't you come in now? And
wow.
I said, okay. I mean, the only word I'm going to use with the doc, he was called the doc, is yes. So I changed into a suit and drove over to his offices a mile away, went upstairs. And it was late in the day, so there were very few people there, and they showed me into his office. And he said, well, I'm working on these projects, and I'd like you to do this, and I'd like you to do that, and so on. And I'll show you your office. And the office was the last office in this office building. It was a little tiny office in the very, very back. So when can you start? I said, I'll start now. And I said, we'll work this weekend. He said, good, we'll talk again on Monday. And on Monday, when he came in, I had already accomplished several things. And he said, that's exactly what I expected of you. And he just gave me project after project. And I made him millions of dollars. And I developed big shopping centers and office buildings and did consulting assignments for his financial industry. And it was amazing, just amazing. And 18 months later, he sold the entire complex for $500 million.
Wow.
And he kept about $300 million worth of his businesses, including a television station, which was the most popular television station in that area, and a couple of other things. And so I, from there, after 18 months of intense working for him, I moved on. But I will never forget working with Dr. Allard. And it was a great honor because he never had anybody like me work for him ever again. It was just sort of like an inspiration that he had that it would be a good idea. And I reckoned that I made him more than $25 million in profits in the 18 months that we worked together. I built businesses for him. I did all kinds of consulting assignments, and he would always give me guidance and advice and guidance and advice. And basically I was being tutored like an apprentice or like a mentee by one of the most brilliant business minds in history. And then a short while after I left, he died. And I never forgot it. Never forgot. Even today, I think about that. Think about Dr. Allard. What a wonderful effect he had on me. His greatest effect was the character. He had such character, so honest. There was a kind of a joke about H.L. Hunt in Texas, and they said you could take a handshake with H.L. Hunt to the bank anywhere in the Western Panhandle, because if somebody had witnessed you make a handshake deal with H.L. Hunt, that was enough. He went to the bank and said, H.L. Hunt's going to back me on this and I need this money. He said, well, did you have anything to say? He shook my hand. He shook your hand, you have all the money you want. That was his integrity. And Dr. Allard had the same level of integrity, is that a handshake with him on an agreement or on a deal was like gold, like dying and going to heaven. Whatever he said, he always followed through. And I sat and I worked with him going through different challenges, and where he was obviously right and they were obviously wrong. And he said, it is not enough to be right. You must appear to be right. And so therefore it's the appearance, not the actual details. So rather than suing people and everything else, he said, it's much better to negotiate our way out of this. Even though we are 100% right and they are 100% wrong, it's the appearance that's most important. Never forgot that. As you must not only be right, you must appear to be right. And so his reputation was impeccable. If somebody said anything negative about Dr. Allard, they would look like a fool. Because everybody who had ever met him or met anybody who worked with him knew that this man was a great man. Not only was he brilliant, but he had great character. And so he set a model for me. Now, the reason he hired me was because I was similar to that. As I believed in the importance of integrity and hard work, and he saw that, and so he invested a lot of time with me. When I would work in his offices, he had 200 people there, and at the end of the day, 5 o'clock, 5:30, everybody would leave, and I would stay in my office, at the end of the hallway, and the phone would ring, and it would be Dr. Allard in his office, and he said, "Are you free?" And I said, "Absolutely." So I would go down and sit in his office and talk to him for an hour. And he would talk to me and he would share his ideas and his thoughts and his experiences. And then I would go home. And my wife always knew I was late. It was because I was talking to the dog. And almost every night, after everybody had left, he'd call me and say, "Have you got a minute?" And I would go down and talk to him. And for my whole life, I remember those lessons. I loved and respected that man. One of the things I think of, I should write a book, and I have a title for it, and I've had a title for it. It's going to be titled "Me and the Doc," and just write my story and my experiences with Dr. Allard, me and the Doc. But that set a standard for me of hard work and integrity that was inviolable for the rest of my life.
Well, I'll be the first one to buy that book. I mean, that is just spectacular. And, the impact that he had on you, for him to call you in every night, you had a pretty remarkable impact on him as well. So I'm sure he was very grateful for having someone like you come into his life. So, Brian, this has just been amazing. So first, if you ever need an assistant, you call me. I'll be there immediately. Second, I just want to reinforce for everybody that's watching and listening to this, probably with their mouth hanging open from all the same way I am. I got to keep reminding myself to close my mouth because your stories are so good. I'm just like, but that, you know, they look at you and you truly are one of America's great heroes, one of America's great success stories when it comes to business and specifically when it comes to personal development. You know, you're at the top of the list, and people say, well, it's easy for you, Brian, you know, because you're successful and rich and all this stuff. Every one of your stories was about how you didn't have anything and you didn't know how you were going to get through the next day. And I think that is most inspiring of all.
I have had many conversations, including today, with my friend who came over as a penniless immigrant from Denmark and could only get a job harvesting blueberries in a farm in British Columbia, and is now very wealthy and successful, very wealthy and successful. He's my dear friend as well. And what I found is when you get together with people like him and other wealthy people who have worked their way up as entrepreneurs, and they talk around the table, they don't talk about their money, they don't talk about their successes, they talk about their failures, and they talk about the big mistakes they make and the dumb things that they did and how much they lost here. And the only other subject they talk about is their children. So wealthy people talk about their mistakes and what they learned from them and their children and how proud they are of their children. And if you ask a wealthy person, even myself, and I'm not wealthy, I tell my kids I'm well off. But if you ask me, what is my most important accomplishment in life, it's my children. This is my wife is absolutely wonderful, and our 4 children, and now their grandchildren. And that's what successful people think about. It's the lessons they learn and the people they love.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I can vouch for that because of the people that I've interviewed that are, you know, successful and well known and icons in our world. They have said the same thing. I'm like, when you finally reached when you arrived, tried so hard to make that money, you know, and make that $1 million or whatever it is, and when you finally arrived, was it what you thought it was going to be? And they always say no. Right? Jim Cathcart said that. Mark Victor Hansen said that. You know, they're like, no. You know, and it turns out that the things that's most important are the relationships that you have with your spouse and with your children. You know, and so yeah, it's beautiful. Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, the legendary Brian Tracy. Brian, thank you so much. This has just been I'll remember this conversation for the rest of my life. Thank you so much for making time to be with us today. You truly are the definition of mesmerizing.
Thank you, Tim. I'm so happy to be with you, and I'm sure we will talk again.
Oh gosh, I look forward to that. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Holy cow. Wow, I just took you to the movies, right? Well, not me. I was passing out popcorn. Brian took you to the movies, right? Just telling you his story. I mean, it was really, really outstanding. So 2 things you need to do. You need to go to briantracy.com and you got to get his stuff. Because if you haven't got his stuff, I don't even know what's happening because everybody has to have his stuff. It's like every hotel has the Bible. If you're going to be in personal development, you need to have Brian Tracy programs. Were you going to say something?
Is we have a free program on how to set and achieve your goals for anybody who goes to briantracy.com. There's a lot of free things that we give away to help people to be successful.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's extraordinary the amount that you give. One of my favorites, get the motivational quotes. He has that where you can get the motivational quotes too. They're awesome. I love it. So you got to get those. You know, every day you get something that inspires you. So once again, thank you, Brian. I really appreciate you. And everybody, thanks for listening. Share this with your friends. Share this with your loved ones and apply what you've learned. Brian has given you the secrets to success and fulfillment. Now you got to put it into action and eat that frog. So thanks so much, everybody. Stay mesmerizing. We'll talk to you next time. Hey, would you like more free tips on how to be a mesmerizing leader? Then check out mesmerizingleadership.com and also hang out with me on Facebook. Facebook.com/Tim Shurr. Thanks so much, and make your day a sure success. Hey, it's Tim Shurr. Would you like to learn my best secrets for how to be mesmerizing? Then head over to www.survivingtothriving.me. That's www.survivingtothriving.me. I'll see you there.